Then it disappeared from the news permanently. They dubbed the tape of Osama and they said it was proof. Jealous of our freedom, I can't believe you bought that excuse. Rocking a motherfucking flag don't make you a hero. Word to ground zero. The devil crept into heaven. God overslept on the 7th. The new world order was born on September 11th. Father, forgive them, for they don't know right from wrong. The truth is set you free, written down in a song. And the song has the cause of death written in cold. The word of God brought to light that'll save your soul. Save your soul, motherfucker, save your soul. And just so conservatives don't take it to heart, I don't think Bush did it, cause he isn't that smart. He's just a stupid puppet taking orders on his cell phone from the same people that sabotaged Senator Wellstone. The military industry got it popping and locking.
The towers didn't burn up, nor did they slam to the ground. They turned into dust in midair, 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 midair.
Building 7, a 47-story building, didn't even fully spill across the street. If you had a big building coming down like that, even with explosives in it, it'd be like machine gun fire on all the adjacent buildings. Didn't happen. And this dome doesn't look clobbered. It's right across the street. You don't see that debris piled up on the ground. This is right at ground level. So now we're going to talk about the bathtub. I don't know what the lighting is. If the building crashed to the ground, Manhattan would have been flooded because that dike around the bathtub would have been ruptured. And all of the PATH train tunnels and subway tunnels are all connected underground, and they would all have been flooded. That didn't happen. Here are the towers before they built across the street. There was just water right there at the base of the towers. And the towers go well below the water table. There's also the rail lines that come under the Hudson up into the base of the bathtub. That tunnel was not damaged. First they were worried because they had water in the tunnel, but they had fire hoses on it, rainwater going in there. But once they pumped it out, it stayed dry. That's the bathtub wall. It's called, or slurry wall, or dike, whatever you want to call it. It keeps out the Hudson River. The towers were actually built in the Hudson River 70 feet below the water table. That's 7 times 10. So they're pretty far down there. And if that thing had been ruptured, Lower Manhattan would have been flooded. And here's the Hudson River. And as they're constructing it, you can see way deep down in there is the base, down there in bedrock. The PATH trains from the Jersey side used to come up through here and back out, but they rerouted them to turn around in the new big bathtub.
I thought the seismic data you were going to look at was data associated with the collapse of the tower, particularly 2.
Yes. Oh, yes. We did look. Obviously, we've looked at all of the seismic signals. The main focus of that was to establish the timing of the various events, and if any, again, using it also to see if there were any events that we could not explain other than it being the collapse of the towers and the World Trade Center 7. The signal strength due to the collapse of the towers were not of any magnitude that was seismically significant from an earthquake design standpoint, or from the design or failure of a structural component, or of, I would say, a piping system that might be used in a structure. So there wasn't anything that gave us pause in terms of that being a significant seismic event to have ruptured the pipeline.
This was a meeting that NIST had to determine what happened to Building 7. So they're wondering if there's any pipelines that went through the bathtub over to Building 7 And he said it wasn't seismically significant enough to have ruptured a pipeline, to cause any damage. You have two buildings, 500,000 tons each, slamming to the ground, and it's not a seismically significant event? And the bathtub's fine at the end of the day. Tower 1's base is right here, down the bedrock. There's the old parking garage, after they cleaned it out. And if the buildings had slammed to the ground, the seismic signal would have shown it. Didn't happen. Michael Ober said, I don't remember the sound of the building hitting the ground. Somebody told me it was measured on the Richter scale. I don't know how true that is. If the building's hitting the ground that hard, why do I not remember the sound of it? It's amazing. And somebody who worked in the 27th floor decided to go home because he wasn't going to get anything done that day. Went down to the ferry terminal, the south end of the island, and some idiot, they thought, came running up and said, the tower just collapsed. And they thought, that's ridiculous. They didn't hear it. They didn't feel it. When they walked past the tower, it looked like it was in good shape. Well, I think I know why it didn't make a sound. That part of the building doesn't make a thud when it hits. Dust gradually settles, and that's a lot of dust. This is an earthquake that happened earlier that year, in January of 2001, in Manhattan. So we know that the bedrock that the tower sat on can carry a seismic signal. But here's what Tower 1, the signal it made. Notice the difference in the quality. This is very high frequency. The lines are very closely spaced compared to this. Also, it has this, I call it the snout leading up to the big signal. It has that leading portion, which is the primary wave. The P wave arrives first, and then the secondary wave arrives. This is neither a P wave or an S wave. This is only a surface wave. P wave and S wave travels through the Earth. In other words, when during the tower's demise, the signal did not travel through the Earth. Again, that's the January 17th earthquake. And here's, P wave is like a rubber band snap, and the S wave is like a jump rope. And the rolling surface, like getting up off a mattress in the morning, the mattress springs back up. If you remove two 500,000-ton buildings, you're going to create a surface wave. But it only lasted 8 seconds. You know it takes 9.5 seconds to throw a bowling ball off the roof of the towers and have it hit the ground? So how can this be? The building couldn't have reached the ground as a solid, rigid object. Here's where Tower 2 had already gone by the time this chart started. Tower 1's demise there. But here we're going to focus on Building 7, down here. There was an earthquake in the Fox Islands up by the Aleutian Islands, and that's what the mess is after that. But where this vertical red line is, there's no seismic event that shows up at this scale. Nothing that stands out from background noise. For a 47-story building's demise, this is the King Dome. So here's a controlled demolition, and it produces a P wave and an S wave. So what length of time does that take? It takes, for a free fall speed from the roof to the ground, is about 4 seconds. But the portion of time that the ground shook was more than twice that. So that doesn't answer the question either of what we saw. And with Building 7, what is very telling is that they calculated when the P wave and the S wave should have arrived because they could not pick it out from background noise. They couldn't even pick out where the surface wave arrived at one of these stations. So there's 5 different stations reporting, and they had to calculate when the S wave and P wave would have arrived, and it was not there. The signal did not travel through the Earth. So if we have Seattle Kingdom, we're going to look at things relative to that. That made a 2.3 on the Richter scale when it was blown up by controlled demolition. And we have these 2 towers. Let's say for Tower 2 is the first to go. So if we turn it to dust, all but the bottom 16 stories, and then drop a 16-story building to the ground, we record approximately the same seismic signal as what was recorded on 9/11. Just pretend this rest doesn't exist. And for Tower 2, if you turn it into dust above the 20th story and just drop a 20-story building to the ground, you get the seismic signal that was recorded. And for Building 7, it's all but the bottom 2.5 stories. Where's the rest of the building? It makes it 0.6 on the Richter scale. That's like a jackhammer. It should have sounded like it was raining dump trucks. You know, big dump trucks go down the road, they wake you up at night because they vibrate the ground.
And as a matter of fact, Rumsfeld, now that I think back, without 9/11, you couldn't have a war in Iraq or a defense budget of world conquest proportions. Kill freedom of speech and revoke the right to abortion. Tax cut extortion, a blessing to the wealthy and wicked. But you still have to answer to the Armageddon you scripted. And Dick Cheney, you fucking leech, tell him your plans about building your pipelines through Afghanistan and how Israeli troops train the Taliban in Pakistan. You might have some house niggas fooled, but I understand colonialism is sponsored by corporations. That's why Halliburton gets paid to rebuild nations. Tell me the truth, I don't scare into paralysis. I know the CIA saw Bin Laden on dialysis in '98 when he was top 10 for the FBI. Government ties is really why the government lies. Read it yourself instead of asking the government why, cause then the cause of death, the cause the propaganda to die.
It is hard to conceive, but 3 days ago, both World Trade Towers rose 1,362 feet into the sky. Visit those same towers today. At their tallest point, they rise maybe 100 feet above the street. And while it's true there are 6 floors below street level, now filled with debris, engineers at the firm that built the building's best guess to account for the missing 1,200 feet of material from each tower is that large portions simply vaporized into the dust that rained down on New Yorkers immediately after the collapse. It was that powerful.
Get out of here!
We're talking here about 43,600 windows, 600,000 square feet of glass, 200,000 tons of structural steel, 5 million square feet of gypsum, 6 acres of marble, and 425,000 cubic yards of concrete, turned in good part into a cloud, says environmental medical doctor Stephen Levin.
I was astonished at the degree to which solid materials were turned into pulverized dust as a consequence of that building collapse. I think it was striking.
The environment, but most interesting in the mix, they are looking, they think, at specks of steel that used to be beams and elevators, marble from the lobby floor and facings. So what were once the strongest architectural elements in the 2 towers were pulverized, large portions turned into clouds like this one.